Hello, I'm Phil Svitek, 360 Creative Coach, and welcome to my vlog, where it is both my mission and simultaneous pleasure to highlight my creative journey in hopes of inspiring you, giving you specific takeaways, and all in the hopes that your journey is at least a little bit easier. So, before we get into things though, I would like to take the opportunity to invite you to subscribe if you haven't already, that we get all the various lessons and episodes that I put out right when I put them out. Thank you if you just did, and thank you if you already were. It truly does mean a lot to me, as I hope it does to you. So, let's really dive into things, shall we? Last week, I basically summarized 2 months or maybe even more of stuff that's been going on. And so this week, I'm going to kind of touch upon some of that stuff, but more so, highlight what this past week has been like. And, sometimes it's good to put a word to a certain emotion. And I don't know what it is, but frustration would be the emotion that I think encapsulates just everything that I've been doing, right? And it doesn't mean that progress hasn't been made. It doesn't mean that things, to a degree, aren't going well. But it just seems much harder than, not that it should be, but yeah, it's just hard. And as I said, frustrating is the perfect word to utilize. So let's start with my second feature, a Bogota trip, which we're trying to get over the full finish line, right? So we had a premiere back in June, and it was wonderful, but in that sense, we prioritized certain things, and now we want to just finesse it, right? Just really being nitpicky about it, and just adjusting a VFX here, adjusting some audio, heightening it, blah blah blah, whatever it may be, right? And so just trying to get that over the finish line, and it's difficult because in many ways we all have sort of moved on to a degree mentally, right? Certainly I talked about it in last episode. Now this is the part of the process that you're really doing it out of necessity, but creatively it's like I've already made the movie. Now it feels more like a chore than an actual thing. And unfortunately for all of us, life kind of moves fast, and so we're having to make the time to do this. And it's not a lot of things, but also just other life matters have complicated it. And that's why I'm a big advocate of when you have the people to just do everything that you can, and get it done, right? That's why I knew one of my frustrations with this movie, although in hindsight it worked out really well, was I had always wanted to film everything in the 2 weeks that we were in Colombia. And through no one's fault, there was a couple scenes that we just couldn't get done there. And so we need to plan essentially 3 days of LA shoots. We could have done it faster, but it just ended up being spaced out over 3 days. And coordinating everyone's schedule to make that happen was a big difficulty, right? And so, yeah, I just know from past experience, that phase of it is over. When you have the people, get everything done, sort of thing. Because once they're out into the world, life moves pretty quick, as they say from Ferris Bueller, and just life in general, right? That's the adage. But, it's not that anyone isn't doing a good job or so forth. We are. It's just, our schedules aren't kind of aligned. And so communicating and just getting it past that finish line, especially, there's a deadline we need to meet So that doesn't help things for any of us, unfortunately. Although it is, it's deadlines in a weird way are like a double-edged sword, right? They're good because they give you, okay, like we got to get it done. Hell or high water, let's go get it done, and that's it. Much like I talked about with the premiere for June, it was like by hell or high water, we have to have something that's good. Maybe not like the completed, idealistic version we have in our mind, but like we need something for that, right? So it galvanizes things. But at the same time, that creates pressure. So pressure is that double-edged sword. And kind of on top of that, what's, in many ways, one of the things I thought about was, okay, as a worst case scenario, and still it's a possibility, but we could, just use the version we had, and had used in the June premiere at Marina Del Rey, because it's certainly presentable, but the problem is the requirements for the screening are different than the festival for June. And so that means I have to go through the process to make what we call a DCP, a digital cinema package. That's this process that creates essentially a file that theaters can ingest and play. And so, there's a cost associated with that, and the requirements for this are vast, meaning they're very specific, and they want backups upon backups, which all of that just costs more money, right? And not only, whereas with Marina Del Rey, we were able to just provide a link, which is much cheaper versus like a hard drive, which not only are you like buying the hard drive, you're paying for them to put it on the hard drive, and then you have to take that hard drive and you have to ship the hard drive. So it's a lot more costly already. And so in that sense, it's like, okay, well, if I'm already going to pay the money to do this, I'd rather have it be for the final version of the film that we have moving forward for all festivals, instead of just now, paying, let's say $1,000 or more priced out to essentially just a one-time screening, right? It doesn't make sense. And so that's the frustrating part, is just getting it to that finish line. And, even the company that I'm working with, they're kind of like, who the hell requires, all of this? Like, that's just asinine. And I'm like, yeah, listen, I get it. But unfortunately, trust me, no one, like the fact that, a Blu-ray and a DVD must be provided, it's like, yeah, that could knock off like $500, almost $600, but they're requiring it. And you know what? In the end, it'll be good for me to have a Blu-ray and a DVD master for my own personal stuff, but damn, it's just a lot, It's just a lot. So yeah, just trying to get all that done. And in the midst of this, we're kind of entering an interesting phase of the film, because now we're going to be getting a lot of responses about the film, whether we got into festivals that would play in September, October, November, right? Like that would be the bulk of the festivals that we would play, assuming that we get in. And already we've gotten, responses. And as you can kind of sort of surmise based on what I'm talking about, we did get into another one that we're preparing for, and I will kind of make a more official announcement once we know the screening date and details. But yes, there's one that is coming up, but we've also gotten rejected from others. And I've been rejected with this film before, certainly from the Cannes Film Festival, which was no surprise in that sense. And we've gotten rejected to other festivals that weren't as grandiose as the Cannes Film Festival. But that was when we had a working copy, and the working copy, I talked about this in the past. Like, you really had to take a leap of faith on it, right? Where it was fully edited, but there was no color correction. There were no VFX, and the sound was pre-sound design, and it was just god awful, right? And so even for me, who's seen plenty of rough cuts, I could look at that and be like, okay, there's something special there. But the question lingers of, is the team good enough to actually make this good? And when you don't know the people, yeah, that's a big leap of faith to take. And so I could understand why there would be that rejection in those early rounds, right? But now, when we have essentially, for all intents and purposes, the movie's like 98% done, right? The things that we're changing are really, really nitpicks that no one had noticed from the first screening. It was just, our own internal sense of neuroses as artists of like, let's just put the finishing touches on this, right? And so anyone can watch that and enjoy it, right? And, from an objective standpoint, that it ultimately doesn't have anything to do with the quality of the film, right? Festivals pick based on any number of factors, right? What they think their audiences will like, what sort of theme that they're trying to create, all that stuff, right? But even though on the logical level that is understood, doesn't mean emotionally that there's not a pain there of rejection, right? And especially when you work so hard, and when for me, I know it's both for me that like the stereotypical blood, sweat, and tears went into it, as well as money. But then I also know my team is essentially doing that, and if anything else, I don't know, I like to think on the altruistic side of it that, yeah, I really want these victories for my team, and not getting them just does suck, and the more and more you sort of get of them, it messes with your mind, this is why actors, they talk about like it's a very difficult process to go from audition to audition, because you're getting like literally thousands upon thousands of no's, especially when you're starting off, to then make it. And listen, rejection is just all part of the process. It's not indicative of anything. As Brene Brown talks about, she could fill an entire football stadium of rejection letters for her first book. And again, logically, yes, that makes sense, and it resonates, you get it, but there's just something about the emotional side, like you can't do anything about that. It still effing sucks. And so that'll be sort of the greatest battle in August, is as more and more festivals get back to us, I'm sure some will be yeses, but then I'm sure that a lot of them will also be nos. And so it's being able to sort of work through that. And, for me, I try and stay busy. Like, again, we're focusing on just completing the movie in the way that we can. We're talking with sales agents and distribution companies and things like that. So, keeping that ball rolling to be able to get the movie out onto streaming platforms and so forth. So any of these so-called rejections are not indicative and will not hamper that. But again, just as the artist, it messes with you. And you try and stay busy, but that in itself has its own, like I said, I've been identifying these frustrations of that side of it. Creatively, I'm trying to outline what could potentially be a third film, and I like, so basically there's two outlines that I have that I really like both, and I'm undecided on which one, but I'm making sure that both outlines are as complete as possible, because either way, I want to make them. It just depends which one I make first. And by doing that, you're essentially trying to create two completely different stories, and just even creating one story in general is frustrating enough, or difficult enough, and hence the difficulty can lead to frustration. And one of them I'm actually relatively done, at least like me, like I'm settled upon of like, okay, this is a good outline. And right now I'm sort of getting feedback on it. So like that side of it at least like can make me feel good. I'm trying to finalize the second one, which is a fantasy story. And fantasy has the pitfalls of a lot of things that you can come up with could be cliches. And so, working to eliminate those cliches is very difficult work. Takes a lot of time and patience, and therefore it creates frustration. And not only that, not only is it a fantasy thing, ultimately it would be a trilogy. And in order for all of it to make sense, I want to layer in things that will pay off by the third movie. And so you have to think of that and know where things are headed in order to be able to write the first one. And so essentially you're creating an outline for the entire trilogy. So it's not just one story, it's three, and none of it, you don't want any of it to lag, as they, like a lot of times it's the, even within a singular story, a singular movie, the middle can tend to drag. And then certainly when you extend that out, when you have a trilogy, the second movie can be just filler. And I don't want it to just be filler, right? Nobody ultimately does. It's just sometimes, it happens that way. And so, trying to resolve that and figure out solutions and so forth is difficult and therefore frustrating. When you just can't solve something, and when something's just not working, or feels stupid and cliched, it leads to that. So, in some sense, it's good that I'm doing this because it, for lack of a better term, distracts me from just focusing and being anxious about a Bogota trip and, what's going on with that. It allows me to satisfy creativity, but, better or worse, yeah, it's difficult, right? And that's why, there's a TV show called The Bear on Hulu, and I really like it. A lot of other people like it. If you haven't seen it, check it out. And without spoiling anything, there is a moment where two chefs talk about kitchen fires, right? Like everyone in their lifetime accidentally starts a kitchen fire, right? That's basically the crux of what they're talking about. And then they sort of talk about, you ever just kind of stare at it and you're like, you know what? If I don't do anything, this entire place would burn down and my life would be so much better. And then both characters kind of think about that, process it, and then look at each other, and it's like, and then what do you do? It's like, well, you put the fire out. And to me, what that means, and it relates very much to creativity, because all the things that I'm talking about, this frustration could be eliminated quite easily by not giving an F about any of this. And yet, so it's like, yeah, just let it all burn and life would be so much easier. But you put out the fire, meaning as artists, we can't help but create, It's not even a choice. It's like, you just have to. It's the blessing and the curse. And that's why it's interesting, like when I talk to certain friends or people that I coach, I do often wonder of like, what's the motive for you? Because for me, there really is no choice but to make this stuff, right? And that's why by hell or high water, I will figure it out. People looked at me like I had 20 bajillion heads when I said, I'm going to make a movie in Colombia. We're going to do it in November. And as of now, there's no script, but if you're in, I will write a part for you in that script, whatever it may be, right? And yeah, by all accounts, that is very, very insane. Like, I look back on it and I'm like, yeah, that was holy crap. That was, wow. And the fact that we pulled it off is not just one miracle, like a series of 8 million miracles to get to this point. And that's kind of an interesting notion too, because, whatever project is out there, good or bad, right? It still takes a vast amount of effort. And when that's not that the audience ever has to recognize that, it's not the audience's role to see behind that and be like, oh, well, they put in a lot of effort, therefore I like this. No, they're supposed to objectively look at it and just be like, was it a good piece of art or not? Did I enjoy it? Did I not? Did it resonate with me? Did it not? But again, the theme, it doesn't mean that on an emotional level, it's not painful for the artist. For me, I think about Jordan Peele's Nope, and they invented a specific way to film at night, right? And I'm interested in that because I am a filmmaker. But as an audience, again, all that goes out the window, and it's like, you got to just look at what it is, And that's the interesting part. Navigating all of this as an artist and just being able to go. As Winston Churchill says, success is being able to go from failure to failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. And it's really true. And, overall, I haven't lost the enthusiasm, but there's definitely better days and worse days. And I think, that's why my main driving force is always just make some progress. Just make, even if the day is frustrating as hell, just get something done, right? And not to brag in that sense, but the bar for me is also very high. I mean, there's days, objectively, most people would look at what I do and be in awe of it. I mean, I can think back to yesterday, not only just from one standpoint, I edited 3 podcasts from start to finish, as well as 5 mini podcasts from start to finish. Now, for anyone, or for a lot of people out there, just finishing one podcast in a day, with the level of editing that it requires, of the podcast that I'm working on, would be a fantastic day. The fact that I got that many of them done, yeah, I mean, it's a lot, and it speaks volumes. And yet, on top of that, I did other stuff. And those were good. But then, of course, there's certain things that you want to like ultimately get to, which for me, let's say, is cracking the code on like this trilogy that I'm trying to figure out. And, I didn't make much progress in that. So it's interesting how we fixate on these issues that aren't really issues, but our minds make them the issues. And it's not that nothing got done for that, just not as much as, my ego brain would like. So it's very interesting in that sense to me to consider and think about. And yeah, I mean, for me, that like, realistically, I know I'm not the only one, but yeah, I mean, a lot of this is like a 7-day-a-week thing, just progress every single day. And it doesn't mean that like I don't have fun. Like I went and saw Real Madrid versus Juventus with a friend of mine. I went to a Wiz Khalifa and Logic concert with another friend of mine also last week, right? So these just one of these in and of itself would be like just amazing for people. But yeah, so, I always manage to fit all the things within what I have going on, and find the time, the pockets of fun within that, right? And that's why, like, for me, I don't necessarily need days off or vacation, because the fun is also built into that, even if it's just going to see movies or playing soccer and things of that nature. It's all built into the schedule. But interestingly enough, speaking of the the soccer game and the concert, one of the interesting parts to observe has been just the inefficiency of Los Angeles. So the concert was on Thursday. I went to the airport to pick up a friend on Friday, and then Saturday we went to the Rose Bowl. So 3 different types of locations, and just the inefficiency with which these things are run. Like, it took us 2.5 hours to get into the Rose Bowl. And still we were like 20 minutes late for the start of the game. Just insane to sort of think about, right? And so, yeah, just kind of, I don't know, in that sense too, like, just continuing the theme of frustration, I get very upset with inefficiency. And when I know, like, things can be done better, it just rubs me the wrong way. Speaking of, like, LAX, the airport, they have 2 bus lanes, and yet most buses don't take those bus lanes. They end up in the car lane. Annoying and ridiculous. Then you have these parking structures, and you have, I'll call them off-ramps, so meaning, you get into the parking lot. That's great. That's taking away cars from the roundabout of this airport. But then at the same time, you have exits out of those parking lots near the off-ramp, let's say, and these cars are getting back into the circle traffic. Why wouldn't you just have it so all that traffic goes to the exit? Right? So it makes no sense, and it's very frustrating. Just one loop around this damn airport can take you, quite honestly, 20 to 30 minutes. So it's ridiculous. But as much as I've been kind of, speaking about all this, as I said, it's just an emotion. And I don't know, it's not that I try to suppress emotions or invalidate them and so forth. But I also know, for me, and maybe this applies to you, maybe it doesn't. Each one of us has our own sort of way of through it. For me, it's usually just, okay, I get it. Think about it, express it in many ways like I am doing to you, or, sometimes I'll call my friends and things like that and just kind of get it out and then move on, right? And just continue working in spite of, because in that sense, if I don't do the work, then in a way, it's like someone who's been in, let's say, on a bike accident, and now they're scared to ride a bike, and it's like the longer that they don't get back on that bike, the more they're going to be in their head. Versus, it's like, okay, boom, the moment you can get back on the bike, go, and it's like, oh, okay, this isn't that bad, right? So it's that sort of same philosophy. And yeah, as much as I've been highlighting the negative sides of things, again, you have to work to think about the good stuff and make sure that's front and center. So the fact that I do have a great movie in that we are working on distribution, huge thing, right? The fact that we already know of a festival that we're going to play in, huge, right? It's going to be amazing, right? The movie is fantastic when people see it. I know it'll resonate with them, right? For all intents and purposes, the Wiz Khalifa and Logic concert was fantastic. It was a great night with me and my friend. Even though it took us a while to both enter and exit the Rose Bowl for the Real Madrid match, it was a fantastic game. It was great to, even while we were slowly making our way to parking, we were able to talk and just laugh and so forth, share ideas. So that was great. And, in spite of slower than desired progress on X, Y, and Z projects, they're still moving forward, right? So, that's kind of the life of just an indie artist in general. We all wish we had more resources, but we do the best that we can with what we got and, make it work. Because what other choice do we have? And speaking of the choices, for me, one of the things I talk about with people is I'm either, sometimes they'll throw me a project, and they'll say it's super easy. I'm like, no, thank you. And they're like, no, come on, it's just super easy. You're so good at this. Can you just do this for me? I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't. Because for me, there's two modes. There's all or nothing, And in that sense, there's no easy mode, It's Bill Bird kind of, not Bill Bird, Larry Bird. He had this mode of playing in that same way, where even in practice he was diving for balls and so forth, and they were like, "Yo, take it easy, it's just practice." And he's like, "I can't. I don't know any other way to play." And so that resonates with me because I'm that same way. If I say I'm going to do something, then I'm going to do it to the best of my abilities. There's no easy streak, which is fascinating. Just as kind of a last tangent to all of this, that I think that I've been sort of thinking about is how, in many ways, dating apps are very draining because people within them are testing the waters. And as I thought about it, this is why I don't like them, because if I got on a dating app, it would very much be, okay, now I flip the switch to on, and it's like, okay, now I'm going to make it my mission to, quote unquote date, whatever that entails. And that means engaging with somebody, that you're matched with, then it would be that and so forth. Whereas, it feels like for the majority of the collective, it's like a take it or leave it type of thing of like, whatever, right? Like, it's not to say that many people will say that their end goal is to like date and meet their forever someone, and they get upset when like that isn't happening. And yet it's interesting to observe and listen to various stories of people dating, and maybe this is more of an LA thing, I don't know, but this idea of how people go about it, and in that same way, like, I don't know, there's a differentiation of what's said versus how it's acted upon, right? The words don't match the actions and vice versa. And I don't know, it's in that way, it's quite interesting for me to think about. Because like that was another thing that I thought about, of like this all or nothing thing of like, yeah, why am I so opposed to like dating apps? And it's like, you know what, this is why. But as part of that, or maybe not part of that, but something else that I just remembered is this idea that I've been thinking a lot about, how humanity in many ways seems to be on like parallel tracks. We're all trying to like move forward in life, and we say we want the same goals, and we probably do. But instead of collectively helping each other, there's this struggle for like rugged individualism, when in reality all of us are like sort of drowning. And I don't know, that's been a big theme of a lot of things that I think about. It's been a big theme in some of the writing that I've done and continue to do. And obviously I'm not the person to like solve this on a global level, but that idea that moving towards community-based versus this, because we all are interconnected. And just the simple example of like, okay, I make breakfast in the morning and you make breakfast in the morning. It's like, why can't there be a world where it's more communal, and maybe I'm pitching a commune in that way, but I think, I don't know, I would love to see the world go towards a more efficient place, right? Again, it goes back to that word efficiency, where, we're all just supporting each other in that way. Where the things that we do on an individual level that could be not mass produced, but communal, I'll just use that word again, that they were, right? And it would help. But, we put such an emphasis on that rugged individualism and pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and, you get to make your own life sort of thing. And it's a much deeper topic that I'm definitely not going to do justice in right here, right now, but it has been on my mind for quite some time, and I think that's also part of the frustration that I'm feeling, is that, yeah, we are all on these parallel paths, when I know deep down there's a better way to do it. Because as I said, like, it just feels like a lot of us are just fighting to keep afloat. And yes, there's always things to be very grateful for, and I've highlighted those. But two things can be true at the same time. You can be both grateful and then also recognize, the negative aspects. So, just kind of interesting to, or at least for me, to think about. But yeah, that's what I have for you this week. I know we kind of went every which way. It was more of a philosophical episode than, here's what I did and then here's what I did and so forth. Hopefully that was okay with you and that resonated with you. As always, if you have any thoughts or questions of your own, please comment down below. or hit me up on social media at Svitek. I would love to hear from you. Likewise, if you appreciate what I do and think you would benefit from coaching sessions, well then, by all means, sign up. It's in the description box. Or if that is too steep of a price, or you want to just kind of dip your toe in first, well, check out my Patreon page, patreon.com/PhilSvitek. There's various tiers of support there where we get to interact on various levels. And also, I made mention of the books, the movies, and so forth that I've created. Those are linked to down in the description box as well. If that's of interest, supporting that stuff is great because that means it can be self-sustaining, and therefore I get to create more of it. And the more I get to create, well, then I get to experience it, learn, and share it freely here with you to make your journey at least a little bit easier. That is certainly the hope. Anyway, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. I hope to see you next time.